Yo, that's what's going on with y'all. I've been sitting here banging my head on the wall because it's the first couple of days after the premiere of Chris Reads, and none of y'all have yet to suggest anything, so fuck it, I'm gonna retro-review a book I remember fondly, and I'm gonna listen to it again and see if it actually holds up, or if it's actually shit that is covered in nostalgia. So we kick off Sorcerer's Stone being introduced to the perfectly normal family of number 4 Privet Drive, and this actually works because we're going to be leaving the world of normality really quickly within the story, and so it actually helps to acknowledge that it is in fact set in our own time and place. Well, actually at this point, about 20 years ago, but, you know, still. Anyway, so it's actually quite nice to acknowledge that this does take place within our own physical world. It's a little bit weird that our first point of view is not the point of view of our main character, but it also kind of makes sense because our main character is 1 year old at this point, and this point of view consists largely of crying in a poopy diaper. And the first chapter ends with Harry's delivery to his aunt and uncle by a group of witches and wizards. Even though they aren't actually called that, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding them, and clear that they have abilities that don't exist within our natural world, which, as I've said, we've already established this book does take place in. So it actually is a really nice hook. There's also a lot of reference to Harry managing to defeat someone despite only being 1 year old, and how he's going to be famous, and how there's this other world that we need to be introduced to. Which is great, because this is actually what hooks your reader into the story, and this is exactly what you should do as a writer. You should have something that says, hey, this is exactly why you should stick around through my story, because there's going to be something fun and interesting coming up. So we spend the next bit of the first chapter getting introduced to Harry as a character, and we get to see how he actually feels very, very put out, how he feels like his parental figures don't love him, and how he constantly feels passed over for his cousin, which is good because it helps relate to people who felt passed over for a sibling, or who felt like their parents didn't really understand him, or felt like they were somewhere that didn't belong. And I know growing up, whenever this book first came out, I felt all of those things, so Harry's character actually connected with people like me from book 1, which again is exactly what you want to do. You want your reader to see themselves in the main character, or at least in one of the supporting cast. Anyway, we then get introduced to the world of magic, which is actually a really neat thing, because now that we know who Harry is, we get to experience this whole new world through his eyes. And it comes across as delivering a lot of exposition very naturally, because Harry doesn't know anything we don't, and therefore we get to experience things for the first time that Harry gets to experience them, and all the questions that we as the reader would ask, Harry gets to ask. So all those questions come across as being a very natural thing. It doesn't come across as this huge expedition dump, and this is actually a problem that sci-fi readers and even fantasy writers will often come across, is they have to get this huge dump to catch up with what is common knowledge to everyone. But because we're experiencing this through Harry's point of view, who doesn't have that common knowledge, it's something that we can actually experience together, and it helps broaden our scope of the world along with Harry's. And it actually is really, really nice because it provides a depth and complexity to this world, but there's also the same excuse not to just dump everything, because Harry can only really grab so much at the same time, and he's taking what's important. And it's in the same way where we're introduced to several mythological creatures like dragons or vampires, but we don't really delve too deeply into them, which, as a side, is kind of brilliant on J.K. Rowling's part, because it means that she's adding the possibility of depth and complexity without actually diving into these creatures at all. Just saying like, hey, there is more lore here, and maybe we'll get to it at one point. And we go, ooh, that is interesting, I would like to see that. And it's actually kind of a really nice way to bring about the idea of a deep world. And actually something that helps the world be immersive, which is one of the major points. If you can hit that in a book, your book will have a far greater shelf life. We then, of course, get introduced to Hogwarts and all the professors at Hogwarts and several of the other students. And this is actually used, again, to continue showing Harry's growth and understanding of the world, but also to strengthen his character and to strengthen the character of his friendships with Ron, Hermione, and the other students of Hogwarts. And again, this is actually a good thing to do, because really what you're doing is describing nothing more interesting than his first year of a new school. But because it's all magic and it's a whole new world, and because we're being introduced to all these elements we haven't seen before, it's a continual growth and experience, and while it's, again, something that might not necessarily be seen as interesting from a common view sort of perspective, it's something that is made interesting because of our perspective on the world, and it actually really does end up working very nicely. Anyway, then we have the famous bit with Sorcerer's Stone, which actually is nice because it kind of comes full circle since they've been hinting at it on and off throughout the books, and we get to see Harry have a little moment with Voldemort and kind of come to realize who it was that killed his parents and put him on the path that he's on in life. And we also get to see Harry stand up and use a lot of his trait of bravery, which is nice because it's actually a very good juxtaposition from where we initially saw him in the book doing whatever his aunt and uncle told him to do. We see him grow as a character, and we get to see him take the first steps to becoming this greater person. Overall, I would say this book still holds up pretty damn fine, actually, and it leads to a wonderful world of 7 books, and there are some others that we won't talk about. But it leads to a mostly strong series, and yeah, sure, it's not without the occasional flaw or the little tiny thing I could nitpick, but overall I think it's a really deep, immersive, and fun story, and I think it still holds up pretty damn well to this day. So my personal score for this is 8.5 out of 10. It's pretty damn fucking good. You know, fuck it, I'm gonna make it a 9 out of 10 because I'm on camera right now, and I just thought about that, and I'm like, you know what, it deserves an A. Not a super, super strong A, but a good A, all the same. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at that bingo card. So Harry Potter, of all things, actually did hit bingo once. At least the first book does. The first book is what we reviewed, so I'm not going to go through the whole series on the bingo card. But anyway, that is all for me this time. If you would like me to review something else, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know. Until then, drink plenty of water, tell your parents that you love them, and stroke your mustache at night.